Welcome to the Great Security Debate. This show has experts taking sides to help broaden understanding of a topic. Therefore, it's safe to say that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the people we work with or for. Heck, they may not even represent our own views as we take a position for the sake of the debate. Our website is greatsecurity.debate.net, and you can contact us via email at feedback@greatsecurity.debate.net or on Twitter @SecurityDebate. Now, let's join the debate already in progress. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our annual special episode with our good friends Jess Byrne and Jeff Pollard from Forrester. What's becoming an annual, although variable within the front part of the year as to the actual date, an annual tradition. We're really excited to have a chance to talk with some of the authors of some really great CISO security program guide visionaries from Forrester in Jess and Jeff, and talk about some of the things that we should be thinking about this year. So why don't I let you both introduce yourself. Jess, welcome back.
Thank you. This is my third year, so I do have that over Jeff in this context. Thank you for having me back for the third year in a row, and I'm actually happy to have brought in a colleague now because the two documents that we're talking about, the two reports that we put out are pretty intertwined. So yeah, great to be here.
Great. And Jeff, who the heck are you?
Yeah, I'm just a guy. I showed up because Jess told me to. Although I will be holding a grudge that this is now her third year. So just be prepared for that through the whole thing. This automatically became combative. Who knew? So Jeff Pollard here. I'm a vice president and principal analyst on the security and risk team at Forrester. I've been with Forrester for about 7.5 years now, and I cover alongside Jess and some other colleagues the role of the CISO. My area is kind of primarily focus on overall security program leadership, budgets, business cases, metrics, dashboards, and reporting to the board.
Great. Well, thanks for both for being here. And for those of you listening, if you're interested in reading the reports or the blog posts about the reports, check the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, check down in the description and there'll be links for them both. But I'll point you to the titles. The first one is, as has been for the last 2 years, sorry, Jeff, top recommendations for your security program, 2023 edition, and then navigating the 2023 downturn for security and risk. And I think all of us are living this right now. The doing more with less, or I think I heard somebody say to me the other day, well, couldn't we try doing less with less? And I said, boy, wouldn't that be nice? I really wish I could see that happen. But it's interesting because one of the things I'll call out and want to start with is the recommendation in that downturn document about volunteering to stop backfills, which almost, does it perpetuate doing doing more with less? And is it achieving, I guess, tell me a little bit about this idea and where how it benefits our security programs by not filling people.
Well, I mean, it could definitely hurt the program potentially in the short term because security programs are chronically understaffed. But one of the themes of navigating the 2023 downturn is actually trying to make security a much more ingrained part of the overall corporate culture, right? And to do that, you have to generate some goodwill. And one of the things that we thought about when it seems like a very simple thing, okay, just volunteer to stop, backfills. But to do that, you're sacrificing in order possibly to save positions in other functions within the organization. And we're really thinking about, IT, where they might get hit a little bit harder than security from just a headcount perspective, thinking that it's just IT, right? Security, we don't have enough people to begin with. Let's cut from IT. And so volunteering to do this kind of puts you out there in front with your colleagues, with your peers in IT, with your peers potentially in development, or even other functions in the organization, saying, we're going to sacrifice in order to potentially save some roles in your organization. It doesn't always work like that. So that's one of the reasons why we did it. That's a hardship on the team, though. So one of the things that we recommend is to think about how to make sure you retain the people that are left holding the bag, right? And one of those ways is to actually provide them with a clear path out of this, right? If you continue to do this, you're actually stretching yourself, you're upskilling yourself, whether you like it or not, and you could be moving into your next position. Let's use this as an exercise in succession planning to make sure that you know what the next path for your advancement is within this organization. The other thing we recommend, if you can afford it in these tough times for a budget, is actually to bring in low-cost apprentices, which is a big thing that's near and dear to my heart, right? There are programs that you can bring in folks that have had some classroom education, and then your people who are stretched thin might have to stretch just the tiniest bit more to transfer some of that institutional knowledge, but you're able to actually bring these folks on that can help with some of those more commoditized tasks, can actually maybe help you with a documentation project that you've been meaning to do for a really long time, but nobody else wants to do it. There's ways to actually use apprentices that give something to them and also give back to you in a big way. So I think this is an exercise in goodwill, mainly is this the recommendation to stop and volunteer to stop backfills.
I just finished watching Billions, and so this is me, Chuck Rhodes, owing me a favor. Is that the is that the idea? I mean, I love it. On a theory, I mean, in concept, it makes a lot of sense. Well, of course, we always, especially as executive leaders, want to do what's right for the organization, not what's right for my organization or for any sub team. But I guess a couple of things in there I want to focus in on. One, the upskilling, great, but the idea that giving people paths beyond their current role, how much does that require the leader to be willing and I guess accepting the fact that path may very well mean leaving the organization, because it's been hard to get anybody to be able to commit to paths right now. I can't commit to anything coming forward. I don't know what the market's going to look like. I don't know what our budgets are going to look like. But do this, and we hope we'll be able to do it. But I can't promise you anything, and I can't guarantee. So the people start to look outward.
Yeah,
I have trouble putting that in context. I mean, it's something I'm fine with, but a lot of people don't get there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the organization and what timeframes you're able to give to that person. But oftentimes people leave because they don't see any path at all to promotion in the organization. Obviously, Eric, feel free to jump in if you've had experience with this.
No, I totally agree. I think with people that if they can't see where they're going, but it's a two-way street, right? That if they don't see a road ahead of them, they may leave. But at the same time, this is one of the coaching opportunities we've had with a lot of the team members, that I can help you on your path, but you have to champion your career at the same time. Like, this is where it is. It's got to be a two-way street, that you have to understand where it is you want to go. Because I want to become a CISO. Okay, that's all well and good. I'm not sure everybody, it sounds
You don't want
cool.
to become a CISO.
Yeah, that's where I was going. It's Earl Doobie did a great talk about that. And that was like his starting line, that you think you want to be a CISO, you probably don't. But be that what it may, I think it does make sense that we do have to have certain roadmaps for people. But at the same time, as we've talked about talent and not everybody wants to continue to move up a ladder. There are certain individuals that are fine just I want to stay on the technical path. I love that. That's cool. We also have to lean in and still make sure that we're nourishing them to build them up. And Dan, to your point, I think that goes back to the leader versus the manager. A leader sees that it's about the people, that if your next stop is somewhere that we don't have right now, then you should be looking somewhere else. Right. I could look, as I look back at some people that worked under me in the past, that's where they had to go next, because we didn't have the next spot for them. And that's fine. Right. That we want to continue to champion.
As a good leader, to your point, as a good leader, you want to help find those opportunities, because, we all intersect again, right, at some point in the future. Right. And one of the big things I found I did some research earlier this year and presented to kind of a group of VIP kind of CISOs at our Forrester event back in November. And I had interviewed early career personnel about, what they wanted. Right. And it was, as I went through this kind of initiative to do the talk, the things that were interesting, one of the interesting things, a lot of people said, oh, so you want to talk to CISOs about what early career people need to know? I'm like, no, that is actually the opposite of the talk, because talking to older people about what younger people need fails pretty often. So instead, no, I would like to talk to the younger people about what they need. And maybe identify the things that some of the more senior personnel are not giving them. And that was one of the big things that came up, is that they had sort of reached this point, if they had been around for a couple of years, where they liked it enough, they wanted to stay in it, but they didn't know what job was next, what role was next, what skills were next, what they needed to do, right? They didn't understand how to go from SOC to pen test, SOC to threat intel, from GRC to something else. Like, they just didn't understand. And when they would ask people that were closer to their level, or maybe, a few years more experience in them, they would hear kind of the worst answer in the world, which is get a cert, learn a tech skill. And it's like, okay, but what do I do if I want to go do something else? And they didn't get great answers. And so, yeah, I think you're exactly right with that, is you've got to figure out, is someone destined or desired to be sort of a people leader, or are they a more technical person that's going to want that technical track? And a lot of companies don't do a great job of satisfying those because they can't, right? Budgets just don't allow you to have sort of a fellow type of program. But what they ultimately do is you wind up kind of shoehorning people into people leader roles, because that's the only way they can advance. And, for a lot of people that might get into this technically, especially, that's kind of the least desire. It's like, no, I don't want to have a bunch of people reporting to me. I would prefer not to approve vacation requests, or whatnot. But that's one of the things. So yeah, I think when we say succession planning, it's not just, the next manager on track or whatever. It's also the next technical skill set, and just letting someone know a path they have, because there's a real sense of anxiety, or almost kind of like existential dread of like, well, I've done this for a few years. Now I don't know what's next. And we all know that there's 1,000 things you can do once you develop these entry-level security skills, but there's really not a great path to do it. And you wind up hearing things like get a cert. And that's just not a great, it's kind of a terrible answer, honestly.
Well, not to, throw water on people's belief that they'll figure it out along the way, but I still don't know what's next for me. But I think it actually lays the foundation for the fact that this is one of those fields where you can and should zigzag around, and experience lots of things. But Jeff, that's great. And in the spirit of this podcast and the debate idea, in times of crisis, in times of crunch, which we are now, people resort back to their lizard brain mindset, and that is, I need people in security, at least. I need people who are ready now, that already have 20 years of experience, and can hit the ground running, because I don't have time to train them. And that, I think, is I'm actually seeing it and hearing it more and more, unfortunately, even from people who know better. And and so therefore, all of the things you just said are getting exacerbated further. So again, how can people start to actually action that and get themselves out of that? I don't have time.
I think first and foremost, and we've written about this a few times, we wrote a report a few years ago called the self-inflicted staffing shortage. And the problem, Dan, is exactly what you're describing, in that you had a bunch of security leaders, and the way we phrased this in the report is they were, hiring someone for third shift that knew how to reverse engineer malware, could create brand new cryptographic algorithms in their head, just not even using paper, just in their head. They could perform incident response. They knew everything about application security. They could manage 5 different types of technology. Oh, by the way, they were experienced with 11 different open source tools. They were an excellent manager, and they wanted to pay them $13.50 an hour. So it's sort of like you wanted to hire MacGyver, pay them like McDonald's, and staff this person. And those unicorns don't exist, right? They're not available. You can't do that. And one of the biggest mistakes that we find people make is that you will lose someone that's experienced, and the person that you try to backfill is the person that was experienced. And what you forget and what you mistake is that when you probably hired that person, you were hiring someone with a really different resume. You were hiring them 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, before they had cultivated all those skills. And so you look to replace the person that left. That was a 5, 10-year, 15-year experienced person. When you hired them, they were 5 years of experience. And they obtained all of those skills as part of their career journey. And I understand that things change, and you want to backfill with someone that's, got the same relevant experience. That's actually one of the big challenges we find, is when you look at the actual sort of crunch now from a talent perspective, the talent crunch isn't as much in the front end of security. We have ways to get people into this industry. It's more widely known. It's cool. Look, when hacks happen, they're on TMZ, they're on the front page of newspapers. Like, we're cool now, right? That's like Mr. Robot, everything. Like, we're awesome. And if your spouse and kids don't care, I can't help you, but just tell them that you're cool now because Jeff said so on a podcast, or on YouTube. Also, Dan, I'm disappointed you didn't say smash that subscribe button because that's on like every YouTube video I watch, but you didn't say it. And now I had to say it for you.
Well, thanks. You know what? It
No
actually
problem.
gets more points when someone else says it than if you
That's
just
how it
say
is.
it yourself.
Okay, I
So
got
there
it.
you go.
Yeah. But so back to, sorry, I just thought about that. Back to the career paths discussion. What we find now is that the more of the talent crunch for security teams is actually that mid-level, because we have people leaving the industry because they're burned out. And we have people that there are a lot of opportunities for someone with those skills. So it's not so much the early stage of the career pipeline. What we're starting to find is the real career crisis is in that mid to senior stage of career where people figure out, I don't want to be a CISO, I'm out. Or they, decide to kind of back away and just sort of coast a little bit, whatever it might be. But that's where we're seeing more of the crunch now.
Right. And this comes back to that succession planning topic that we've been talking about too, because you can do this. Like this unicorn is leaving, this self-made unicorn leaves. They take all that institutional knowledge with them. If you had been bonusing that person in some way, tying money to having them teach the folks under them and transfer some of that institutional knowledge in combination with using like training and upskilling platforms for those folks to build the technical skills, and then shadowing somebody like that unicorn that's about to trot out the door to get the institutional knowledge, you're putting yourself in a much better position. And you don't have to have that statement where you're like, I want this person, we're going to go out and hire this person, because there's probably not even enough money in the world that you're going to be able to find that person. It's like one, it's not in one job.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to jump in there, but Dan, because honestly, it's part of it's a culture thing though. Cause I go back to even like my career at Aishin. We were very, very good from
Wait,
a
you
Japanese
worked in automotive?
When did this happen? Why was I not notified?
Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Brian Schneebly, love automotive, worked in it for 15 years.
Lives in Detroit.
But that career path, that you talk about, like bringing in people that are green right out of school, right? And then cultivating them, growing them, training them. And literally we'd have people that were there for 3-5 years. And then of course they're getting that next job that's going to pay them a lot more for the same job, because the only thing that we could do for them was you either got promoted into the next assistant manager or manager role. There was no path forward to make more money doing what you're doing. But we did such a good job training people. Like I would talk to all my friends that worked at our competitors at Bosch, ZF, you name it. They're like, man, we love hiring from you guys. I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. We're like the greatest incubator on earth. We bring kids in out of college, train them for 4 or 5 years, and then offload them onto you guys to become like the who's who of automotive in the next 15 years. And I can literally look across the stage now, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, at all the people in very senior level positions in automotive that were literally incubators, like the people that we trained, right? But we had the culture to train them. And they would say when they got over to those other companies, they're like, yeah, there's nothing like that. Like we don't hire kids out of school because we don't have the time to train them, right? Like we go to companies that we know are spending good 3-4 years and we're willing to go steal them and just pay them a little more money, right? So when I say culture, yes, the culture of the company I worked for very much had the idea of you need to train people, but they didn't have that career path forward for everybody or a way to pay people more money when they got good. And I find that the position you're in now in cybersecurity is if you were able to hold on to people for 3 to 4 years or even 5 years and train them really well, now the year 2023 hit and you can't pay them anymore. So now they're the ones looking to leave. So you talk about that, it's like that perfect storm, right? Like maybe you did create the right culture and help do it, but now you're in that budget area. And just the only contradiction I have to the point about, don't backfill that. People are so worried from like the civility standpoint of, well, if I don't spend it, I lose it, right? Like my budget, like, yeah, I want to help out. Like maybe I could cut cost here, but I know I'm never going to get that back. Right. It's like once the Christmas party goes during the downturn, we've never had even Aishin, they never had a Christmas party ever again. It was like, yeah, we'll get it back, when we come out of this. Never happened. Right. Like, so everyone's always afraid, like if, I'll sacrifice, but that team, if they don't sacrifice, then I'm never going to get this back. And I kind of see some of that just in conversations I've had with people. Like there's a fear, right? And then what happens when people fear? They resort to self-preservation, and self-preservation, like their group.
Yeah, so I don't think you're wrong about that. But part of the point with this is it's partly goodwill, as just mentioned. It's partly signaling to the other executives that as a security leader, you are a real C-level now, right? You know this is happening. You
I'm going to
understand it's
act the
coming.
chair. Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to be that. But the other part is that, right, initially this is a choice. 6 months from now, it's an order, right? So, if you signal it now and say, I'll stop backfills, then suddenly when, the CFO comes around the next time, or the CIO comes around the next time and says, well, now we need to stop backfills. It's like, awesome. I did that 9 months ago. I think you meant for all of your department heads, right? Because I did that.
But some
probably
orgs
not.
go to, what have you done?
Right.
Okay, that's fine. You did that 6 months ago.
Right.
What have you done for me
lately?
today? We're making it across
Yes.
the board.
Right.
Yep.
And that's what people fear.
Yes. Yeah. And that's valid. And I think that's when it comes up to, okay, well, that's when you need to start actually talking about all the things security does. And one of the things that I've stressed over the past year plus or so, and I unveiled this again at that event in November, is that when you look at a lot of security leaders, and I'll give you an example of this. I was on with the CISO of a very well-known North American, multinational company, can't say the name, of course. And this particular company has a customer that is so important to them and so large to them that it's in their 10K, that customer, as a material risk. If this company leaves us, it is a massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
The board was challenging the CISO for benchmarks, and the CISO was like, look, benchmarks are flawed. I can compare myself to people, but if our network spend is twice what somebody else's is, and our network is twice as big, actually the network is the same, right? We're both spending the same amount relative to the network size. So what I shared with him is, okay, from a sort of risk management perspective and supply chain perspective, that giant customer that's on your 10K, what do they require you to do from a security perspective? And he said, they have effectively written my entire program because they are that absurd with their requirements. Like, our risk posture compared to what they require is just ridiculous. But it's done a great favor for me because I just have to say, big customer said so. Well, I'm like, okay, well, that's your benchmark. What you need to do next time you go in front of your board is say, look, I would love to cut more things. What I'd like us to do is get the CFO and our SVP of sales or our chief revenue officer in and have a conversation about cutting those things, because I wasn't bored and decided to buy that, right? We weren't sitting around saying, hey, what could we spend money on? Let's do this really expensive thing that we absolutely don't need. It was actually giant customer on the 10K that made us buy that. So I absolutely agree. Let's get rid of that, and let's just call them and tell them we're going to get rid of it. Who wants to make that call? Because I'm not deciding to get rid of it. Now, of course, you're never this glib. But the point is that
literally like, who wants money?
It's like, look,
money?
this
who wants to stay in business?
And that's hard to do across.
Yeah.
Well,
I just
go
don't
ahead,
think
Jess.
CISOs have been as overt about this as they should be in the past. And I mean, you and I, Jeff, have been talking about this for a couple of years now. Where like, what's driving your investments.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just haphazard. Like, let's just buy a new, tool here and there. There are major constituencies, and customers are one of them. Like they actually move security programs forward, especially in smaller to mid-sized organizations.
The big three things that are driving security budgets, right? It used to be regulators were kind of our monster in the closet, so to speak, right? And so that was who we yanked out to say, well, we got to do it because woo, scary. And then attackers were sort of in there too. Well, now you've got customers that are actually the primary thing that's driving security budgets, because you've got to satisfy what they want you to do with the ridiculous questionnaires and requirements that you disagree with or you have to negotiate, right? So you've got customers. Then you've got the current sort of monster now under the bed, right? That's why you got to turn the light off, jump right in the bed, cover up, because you don't want to grab you as you get in. Cyber insurers, because not only are they saying, right, not only are they saying attest to what you've done, but now they're saying, oh, well, actually that attestation, what we call that is Exhibit A when we sue you because you thought we would pay. So it turned into this form to get insurance, and then it turns out it's actually, plaintiff's Exhibit A. And then the third one is kind of the regulator, right? And the fourth is the adversary. It's not as kind of threat driven as it was before. And by the way, when you talk risk, you don't even need to have sophisticated conversations about risk anymore, which frankly, a lot of security leaders aren't great at anyway, because customers are driving this. Again, this is a business requirement. And that's why we're seeing CISOs be elevated, because we've taken a situation now where security directly impacts revenue. This is a bottom line concern and a top line concern. And there's no way that your security budget is spending more than your customers bring in, or you have a separate problem. So that's an issue anyway. So by using customers that way and saying, look, this is what our major customers are asking us to do, that's why we spent this on our budget. That's why we're making the choices we're making. suddenly now you're having a conversation about a business risk of losing revenue if you start to make deeper cuts to security. That's your ammunition. If you froze headcount and now you're wondering the next shoe to drop, which I agree could absolutely happen, Brian, your next sort of arrow in your quiver is, look, we could cut more, but here's what our top 20 customers are demanding us to do. And 80-20 rule, these are responsible for 80% of our revenue. I thought we were trying to preserve revenue right now, right? We said we may not grow the way we did before, but we're trying to preserve revenue. If we start cutting these essential parts of security our customers require, well, aren't we actually cutting revenue? And I thought we were trying not to do that. This is how I contribute to it. No, I'm not out there selling, although you could be as a customer facing CISO. What I'm actually doing is satisfying our customer requirements. And oh, by the way, in our sales pipeline, we filled out those third-party risk management questionnaires, and these things you want to cut, that also directly overlaps with sales pipeline that you have right now too. So that's going to risk deals that we might lose as new business coming in. That's how you're overcoming that second round, so to speak.
I'm quantifying that now in sales opportunities that are sales opportunities and sales retention that have huge security focuses, that are material to getting the deal or keeping the deal. And those are going as part of enterprise metrics. And
it should be metrics presenting to the board, showing that like this, security is now responsible for revenue. In fact, one of the things I kind of concluded my presentation on at our event was security is now the cost of doing business. That's the world we're in, because customers are not going to go with you if you downgrade or risk their security posture, right? Because we all know everyone moves laterally. And so that's it, Dan. So to your point, the way that you're framing that, and by the way, I'd love to see it just for my own research.
Sure.
But that's a big part of this now, is framing it that way and saying, look, like I'm driving revenue.
Yep. Now, if we could only stop having to fill out stupid security questionnaires.
That's an entirely different discussion.
That's a topic for another day.
Luckily, I don't cover that. That's Olive Valente's issue.
So
yeah,
it's one I'm passionate about.
We're going to accountability shift that one right away.
Yep. Cool.
Dan, all I was going to say there was like that note that I put in there about monetizing like everything that happens, right? Like, in Eric, going back to the whole manufacturing side of the house, right? Like there's a cost of quality, there's a cost of warranty, right? When one of the big manufacturers was slapping a $20 bill on every transmission they were building, right? They had to start thinking about, well, are we going to outsource our transmission? Are we going to do something different? Like, we need to make this better, but they don't know what their warranty cost was till 3 years down the road when they're already in production. And it's a hard thing to fix them when you're throwing away $20 at a time. When you can see the impact then from a security side, what's the cost? If you're able to monetize that with all the things that happen and you're able to track those things, then you have good data to be able to say to your board, to your CIO, to whoever, right? Like, well, here's what the cost is, right? Here's the things that we're working on, right? Here's what the downtime is. I think that's why when you look at some of the big automakers and what they're going back to the suppliers, and I know, Eric, you're living through some of that, where now the requirements, to your point, Jeff and Jess, is now the customer's driving some of those additional requirements, and those are the customers that drive your revenue, right? Like if 60% of your revenue is directly related to, say, a General Motors or a Volkswagen or someone else, and this is their requirement, it's like, guys, if we don't do this, we may not get the next transmission business or the next driveline business or the next this, right? Like,
it's taken,
but also
forever
need to
for
drive
people to
pricing
put this together. Yeah, like, but for some reason it's just lived separately. Whereas this is tying security to the cost of doing business, to Jess.
Yes.
And again, get aggressive about it, especially now. And that's really what was kind of the main theme of that navigating the downturn guide, and a lot of the work that we've been doing this year, going back to Jeff's talk on winning every budget battle, because it's right there. Use it. It's there for you to use.
But the unspoken part is, and I don't know that we'll get into it in deep today, but I had interjected there about building that into the cost of the product. These new requirements that come from customers or that come from regulators or others increase your costs. Therefore, but organizations are loath or very hesitant to raise prices to account for the demands coming in. And so this happens in the FDA quality world as well. There's multipliers on prices. If you run into that world, these FedRAMP, same thing. But in terms of building better security into your product, it's hard to, when you first get that eyeball on what it actually costs, and that's an important thing for business units, product units to understand, is what security actually costs, to figure out how to either reduce other costs to offset that, or decide to raise prices. And that's a different, like I said, I think it's a topic for a different day, but it's one I want listeners to be thinking about, specifically about making sure to keep the business units, the product units that you work with, crystal clear on what these shared services actually cost and what it takes to fulfill those customer and insurance obligations. It's not just magically free or not just covered topside, and therefore you don't need to account for it.
Yeah,
Right.
and Dan, by the way, I've got some in that talk I gave, I've got some math exactly on that where you can calculate it, where you can look at
cool.
what is the value of this customer contract, what are we paying, and then how does this break out? Like how, what percentage of this amount that we've generated is security responsible for? How much of this are we costing? How much is this adding to the cost of the product, the service? Actually walk through a lot of that math to make the case for that, exactly what you're describing.
Well, sounds like everyone should keep an eye out for the next year's Security and Risk Forum. It's a winner, let me tell you. Jess, I want to completely change topics.
Okay.
And swing over to one of the things that's in the recommendations guide around influence.
Mhm.
That, yeah, like I said 180-degree change of
It's all related, but yeah.
I want to go to influence. I want to go, the idea here is that, that CISOs need to be back out there talking, getting understanding business. This sort of jives with that, with a presentation that Eric and Brian and I were at earlier this week here in Detroit, SIM Detroit, and the Michigan Council of Women in Technology hosted a great technology leader summit. And one of the panels was board members sharing about the way that CIOs and CISOs interact with the board. But one of the themes that came out of that I heard out of it, and Eric, Brian, tell me if you heard differently, was that technology leaders don't yet have a handle on what makes the company money, on how the company really works and operates. And it felt to me like it was because they weren't spending enough time, that we collectively weren't spending enough time with our colleagues. Like, you are good. One of the things I heard was, CISOs CIOs often feel like, I'm not good enough to get in the room and actually talk, and I'm just here to listen and be a participant, but not like actively drive the conversation. But that's ending, that's over. So I want to get your take on this, how that fits in, how this influence piece fits in, and how people can start to go and reclaim that knowledge of the business and organization and build those really strong relationships.
Yeah, and Jess, feel free to jump in anytime with this too. But I think CISOs sat in their home offices for quite some time, or at least just in the headquarters, wherever it was that they were, headquartered, and just did the changes that needed to be done in order to migrate during the pandemic. That is moving in cloud environments and kind of changing up technologies, trying to make sure hybrid work works for everybody. And so, but they hadn't actually gone out there and see how all of that's gone over with the general employee population in probably 2-3 years. It's definitely been a few years. So one of the things we recommend is, if budget permits, get out there and do a bit of an influence tour and go to some of your key locations, go into those offices on in-office days, however however your culture has it set up in terms of people coming in, and start at the top, right? Meet with senior leaders and just confirm their goals and objectives. Listen, this is some listening. It's not always talking yet, because I think getting back there and getting a bit sort of a baseline of where things stand in terms of friction and employee attitudes about security is where you start. Talk to those senior managers, then get into small group discussions with manager director level folks, and get feedback on adoption of secure practices that have been maybe recently rolled out, ways of doing things that have changed since 2019 that are now fully operational across the organization, and then go one click further and actually, if you're not going to be creepy about it, get permission and shadow folks as they do their jobs. Right?
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Just sit right there and just say no. But actually, and don't just look at people in HR and finance, although that's extremely important. I would say very, very important in finance when you're thinking about things like BEC attacks, which are on the rise. Like, figure out what their processes are like and how it could be that they could get duped into wire transfer fraud. But then go beyond that and think about the shop floor. Go beyond that and think about individual hospitals, right, in a health system, retail locations, anywhere where someone has to go through some sort of a secure practice, be it, authentication or something else, and see where things are getting hung up, right? And then bring all that back to your team and start prioritizing. And this is when you can start talking. Okay, we heard you. Here's what we're going to do to change processes to make sure that you can do your job more easily. And make sure that you get somebody like a BISO or your deputy in charge. This shouldn't have to be all on you as a CISO, right, to do this. And then from there, one of the things that I'm thinking, we have customer advisory boards. It might be a really good idea, and maybe some companies have it, to have employee advisory boards for security and have that a mix of seniority, a mix of functions, just to understand, what's holding them up from doing their job and what can security do better. And again, constantly promoting what security is doing to make sure that you're able to do your job, ties it to revenue in that way as well. It ties, if there's a traceable alignment up from one project all the way up to moving into a new geography or, expanding a product line. So just getting that influence. I actually do think it starts with listening, because it's been a while for CISOs. And then from there, the talking can start.
Yeah, it's really.
And stay tuned for our pilot, Undercover CISO. It'll be airing on Peacock.
So 5 people will see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not. It's not a ratings play. It's a value play, Dan. So it's quality over quantity, whatever. No, I think Jess is exactly right. One of the things we also found is that CISOs have spent the last decade plus really trying to evangelize up, right? They've managed up. They managed up and out to the executive leadership team, the board, to the CIO and others. And we've started to see CISOs be elevated now to report directly into the CEO. In fact, about at enterprise organizations with more than 1,000 employees on a global basis, about 47% of security leaders now report into CEOs, which is kind of incredible when 47%, when for the 3 to 4 years before that, it was, 50, 60% more than that were aligned with IT. They were reporting into the CIO or sometimes a director or a manager or a VP of IT. Right. So we are seeing an elevation. And part of the reason for that is because CISOs managed up. One of the things I think is going to happen this year and beyond, to the point about the influence tour, is not just socializing yourself with the rest of the org, but it's also about re-engaging with your direct team. In the budgets report, one of the things we found is that from a sort of a tactical and strategic priority, security leaders weren't as focused as managing up and out now. They were much more about re-engaging down through their team and their leadership structure, because they spent so much of their time trying to sort of earn that seat at the table. They've gotten it now, but you've got a balance there, because you can't become, so executive that you kind of lose sight of your team and what your team needs from you. You can't succession style sort of get the helicopter trips across Manhattan or whatever. Meanwhile, your team's like, it takes 2 hours to get there. Like, I can't go from there to there. You've really got to stay in touch with them. So I think part of the influence tour is also re-engaging with your team, but showing the rest of the company that there's someone in charge of that group there that's there to advocate and evangelize for them, because that's also meaningful for the people that work for you when they see you doing that.
Is this going to lead to I guess CISOs are finally to the point where the organization is growing well enough and the need to focus both up and down? Is this going to lead to a rise in the XO or in the deputy CISO role becoming more pervasive?
Deputy CISO and BISO, and I'll hand that to Jess because she's doing so much research. But
the BISO
as you expand those things, you've got to have someone to turn to there, and that's exactly what Jess has kind of specialized and focused on for the last few years.
Yeah, so right, CISO can be focused on up and down, but the across piece, that's where you actually see a BISO role being incredibly effective, or a deputy CISO, depending on how you're structured. Because those folks, I would advocate more for a BISO. Maybe you need a deputy CISO. Maybe your organization is so large you need a chief of staff, right? There could be a role like that where you actually need that help, and maybe that person focuses on the down. But across, if you're able to embed BISOs into business units, and I had a panel with some great BISOs at our last forum. We'll keep plugging the forum because we have great content. Sorry, we just
as someone who's attended it in the past, I can tell you it is actually worth that. It is worth all the plugs.
Yeah. So I had this panel, and like these folks were in there helping, managing directors of business units make decisions about how to use data, about how to work in a specific geography, about what tools are going to be important for this particular unit when it comes to securing the products that they sell. What processes are important. So So that's to me is a critical across piece that we really need to think of, and that's influence, right? That's CISOs. These are little influence agents in every business unit that you're able to use, and really help them understand why security is supposed to be there from the start.
I mean, titles aside, essentially, we're talking about BRM, right? It's business relationship management.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
creating integration points throughout the organization. Because if you take this, but also put it in the context of shrinking budgets and headcount, not all of us are going to have the
That's
enough budget to create those different roles. But certainly, I don't think that precludes us from taking some of the, take some of the SOC analysts or something. That I think we've all got team members that are pretty good at being in front of people and tying them in. All right, this is your relationship. You're going to meet on such and such basis and kind of integrate.
Yeah. That's a huge development opportunity for a smaller team. And
Right.
I'm sure people would be overjoyed to do that. It might be a stretch, but that's good for them if they actually do want to take that path to becoming the dreaded CISO.
And back to our earlier conversation, that should also help with retention, because now it's not the same job every day.
Oh, yeah.
There's more meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that also helps those younger folks too be able to, when I was reading this, right, and talk about doing an influence tour, but influence for themselves, because they're able to evangelize not just what they do from a technical standpoint, but how it impacts the business. And the faster you can get that going downstream for people that are, mid-level that you were referring to, the more they understand the business, the more they become valuable in being able to explain that. Like, I think we've talked about this before. There's a lot of introverts versus extroverts in the security role. So as you move up the stack and now you're in charge of talking to the board, Dan, you were referring to the board members there talking about how it seemed like the CIOs and CISOs that were talking to him seemed so out of touch with what the business was doing, right? But it's also the ability to talk and to present yourself or to evangelize, right? Or to show it what impact you're actually having, right? From a business value.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I
So
love
what the so what part of the conversation. We blocked
Right.
483 million vulnerabilities. So what?
Yeah,
What is
that's
it?
why I love the speak by design classes that
Yeah.
what's his name put together.
Stephanie
Like,
Bingham. Yeah.
yeah, like that, those are really great for helping, like you look at, like, Jeff, you were talking about, like, well, how can I further my career, right? Or how do I move laterally over here? And the advice people are getting is like, well, get that certification and then go get that. I don't think many people are telling them, like, oh, go take a class by speak by design. The better you are at explaining what it is you do, right, the more valuable you become.
Right. Well, and I think if you flip it too, there's an intrinsic impact to business risk, because you create that linkage. You're going to find out much sooner about shifts in risk posture, things that we should be caring about, because you've created that relationship, and allows you to pivot quicker and get out ahead of some of the issues that we may be facing.
That's the big thing a great BSO can do as well. And something Jess has found and talked about is that it's, these are people that represent the security team, but should really have way more knowledge and information in that relationship management world. You mentioned, Eric, like they should know all of the stuff the business is up to, figure out ways to enable it, of course, but also come back to security and say, this is what's going on. This is how we can get ahead of it. And this is how we can help do it. So that's absolutely a big part of it. And as a CISO, you've got so many things that you're focused on. You can't figure out what your data and analytics or your R&D team is going to work on in a year and a half. But if you've got a BSO, a relationship manager assigned to that, they can bring that to you. And then you say, okay, what are we going to need to help with that? If that's actually got legs and it's going to be something that manifests. Yeah.
No, it's a neat area. And I know, Jess, you and I have been talking about the idea of BSOs for 4, 5, 6 years. And it's nice to see it finally playing out, in a more, I guess, in more than just the bleeding edge organizations.
Oh, yeah.
If you were in the FinServ or insurance world, you might sort of say like BSOs, we've had those for a decade now. It's like, yeah, work in a different vertical, and you're going to find that this is a vacuum, right? There is no one that does this. You're just supposed to figure it out. So it's now branching out and going to more industries, thankfully.
And then, I'm at the point now, I'm building an organization, a security and privacy and compliance program across 11 or 12 acquired companies. And so trying to keep all of that straight while figuring out the big picture, like the BSO piece just makes so much sense
Oh, yeah.
in that kind of world, because they're all revenue, they're all product-led growth type companies. So they're trying to develop and innovate in tech and sell and make the product sell themselves. And the security piece really can be huge in making them better products, more secure products, but also making them more saleable products. But it is, right now, as the sole person, it is hard to keep all that straight. And the value of having somebody deeply embedded that understands not just the product, but can also then sell the security in through the product out to the customers is really, really, really appealing. And I guess in a way differently than when I was in financials, in financial services, where the BISO was more of a business risk head, but not necessarily driving product innovation. So it's been neat over the last 10, I guess it's been almost 20 years since that, that started to evolve. We're getting near the end of our time, and I want to make sure to hit on one other really, really interesting topic, and that was around consolidation. I think it was in the, let me find it, I think it was in the downturn report around consolidating your partner ecosystems or not consolidating your partner ecosystems. This is like fighting against every urge that every CFO and every CIO have to get value. Tell me a little bit about this one and how it plays in, because I think it's, again, this is something we're all hearing all the time. Can I get a one supplier? Can I put everything, all my security into Microsoft Office 365, etc.?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack with this one. So, Jess and I have been doing a ton of research on this. We've done a bunch of interviews with it, and I'll share one of the interesting twists in that. When we first started this research, what we were hearing from security leaders is sentences that ended with the phrase along the lines of, that darn CIO, right? It kind of ellipsis, that darn CIO is making us do this. So we did more research, and then we started having conversation with CIOs, and they said, oh, no, it's not us. It's not us, I promise. We're getting the same pressure as an IT org. So we're going to security and saying, can you, because we're being forced to do it. So what Jess and I have to figure out is how we can have a, kind of subverted expectations in this report where we plot twist and the CIO is not the villain anymore. But that we haven't figured out yet, so stay tuned. But one of the big things that we find is that you've got a lot of vendors out there that are making it really, really appealing to go to them, right? We're consistently hearing about, provide those portfolio security vendors. Let's take, could be Microsoft, could be a Palo Alto, could be a Cisco, could be an IBM, whatever. They're effectively saying, look, we will buy to get you to go from one cloud to another. I've recently heard about a hyperscaler that basically said, if you will migrate away from that enterprise compute platform that you're using now with your all-in-one vendor and come to us, we are going to make that insanely affordable for like 2 years for you. And we'll help with the migration. You're not paying consulting cost for that. That's the kind of offers you're starting to see, where you're seeing buyouts, you're seeing things covered. Of course, the challenge, or what really manifests itself, is that, frankly, these platforms aren't nearly as integrated as well as they say when you start to consolidate, right? It's like the UI looks the same, like, all the hex codes on the colors. Yeah, the HTML, all the same. Maybe single sign-on, probably not. You're probably popping out a different window if you pivot to see something.
You are talking about Office 365.
Well, that certainly would, but they're not the only one, right? They're not the only one. It's like the information architecture is totally different. The user experience is different. That's why Ali Mellon and I started writing about analyst experience, because you find that, yeah, there are real cost savings here, but what you generally find with consolidated products is that they're not as capable as what you had before, and they're not as well integrated as they promise. One of the heads at one of the big fours, because I cover security services, once told me that when he goes into one of these big consolidation projects, what he tells them is that when he tells potential clients, this is a partner level, right? So he's incentivized to sell as many of these as he wants. And I'm not going to debate the ethics of various folks in that world, but anyway, let's just say that he says, look, if you are going on a big mega consolidation, if you are looking at savings for consolidated licensing, discounting, and bundling, that's absolutely achievable. If you are looking at operational improvements and efficiencies, and you are looking at savings coming from that, you're 2.5 years away from it at best, and they'll probably never materialize because the tools just don't work that well together, and your processes aren't designed around those tools either. In most cases, you're sort of forced to make your process adapt to the tool, which means your process is less effective. So you have to be very careful with consolidation. If it's a discount play, it can make a lot of sense. If it goes beyond that, you're in a world where it just may not work out nearly as well as you're being promised.
Narrator note, any and all ragging on Office 365 is that of Dan Ayala and not of either Jess or Jeff.
Well, we do have a report coming out, and I will say that I don't expect Redmond to love it. So I'll just spoiler it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, stay tuned. Next couple months, we'll have that out.
Yeah, can I also just say, though, it's also on some of these point solutions to help make a case to save themselves within an organization, because what I hear from a lot of point solutions, and I'm not going to name any particular market category, and I didn't even talk about what I covered, I'm just going to leave it there for this, is that, no one is helping actually fight that battle and helping the CISO make that case, right? If you want to tie specific security investments to the cost of doing business, then you actually, could save yourself as a trusted point solution within an organization by helping that CISO make a business case for security posture changes if they were to yank that tool out, or maturity level decreasing. But there's none of that. There's just a lot of hand wringing about, we're going to lose them to the big behemoths. And get out there and fight for your customers as well.
Or we're better, right? We're better than they are. And the thing is, the better part is not being disputed or debated by anyone, not even the big behemoth. They're actively they're like, yeah, they're better. We're cheaper.
We're good enough. We're good enough.
We're good enough,
and we're cheaper.
Good enough. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The idea on this is, it's something that we're continually fighting. And the other is, and we don't have time to cover it today, but the idea of getting back to basics and getting back to not buying lots more tools and getting back to 4, 5, or 6 that work really well and you use them to their fullest before buying every new whiz bang thing that comes out on the market. Guys, thank you. This was amazing. I can't believe an hour went away so fast.
We could come back again. It doesn't have to be just annual.
Yes. Well, we could do this
well, Jess, we know you'll come back. I'm the question mark, because you're 3 years in a row. Right, so maybe
she's a legacy.
Jeff gets to come back. Yeah, you're a legacy. Maybe I get to come back. We'll see.
Maybe.
This was great. Guys, where can people find you both? What's the best way to get a hold of you, to find you? Well, Jeff, first of all, become Forrester customers, of course. But
yes, become Forrester customers. Obviously, Twitter's a bit of a crapshoot right now, but we're both on there.
Do you have blue checks?
No. And then blogs, Forrester, all Forrester blogs are there with a lot of information that, is in front of the paywall. So we promote them pretty heavily, and there's some pretty good ones out there. So yeah, that's mainly where we can be found.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'd say Mastodon, but after you create your account, no one logs in. So maybe not that one. I'm sorry. I want to love it. I want to love Mastodon. I've tried. It just doesn't work. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at Jeff_Pollard2, and on LinkedIn, Jeff Pollard, and you can find Jess in the same places. So
yeah. I'll put links to them all in the show notes, as well as the blogs, the public blog posts that go with these, the paid research, but you can get a lot of good information out of those blogs. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eric. And thanks to you, the listener. We really appreciate you being here, all of you. And we'd love your feedback. If you have thoughts, ideas, questions for Jess, for Jeff, we can get them to them. Or if you have ideas for future guests or future topics, send us a message. feedback@greatsecurity-debate.net. You can find our website, www.greatsecurity-debate.net, with all of our past episodes. And we are on Twitter for as long as it survives, twitter.com/security-debate, and youtube.com/@Great Security Debate. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again on the next Great Security Debate.